Morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Catalyst webinar series presented by the Education Committee for the Southern California PGA. The Catalyst webinar series is a bi-weekly educational platform for creating success and change in your club and career. We're very excited to have President John Lindert on the Catalyst this morning. Mr. Lindert has been in governance for, I think, probably almost 20 years. He's been on the PGA Board of Directors as District 5 Director from 2016 to 18. He was President of the Michigan section of the PGA 2010 and 11. He's been on the Board of Control for, I think, 15 years, and he served as the chair for 3 years from 2018 to 2020. He was also on the Special Awards Committee on the national level from 06 to 07, and he ran for Secretary, I think it would have been in 2019, 20?
18.
No? Yeah, 18 and 19. And he has worked his way through the chairs over the past 6 years and is currently serving the first year of his 2-year presidency as our national president. John, thank you very much for joining us this morning. We know that your time is precious. And actually just a bit of gratitude to you and the other two executive officers, Nathan Carnes and Don Ray, that have been generous to share their time with the SoCal section as kind of, get to know you, fireside chat. A lot of us in the SoCal section, we know that you're our national president, but we don't really know you. So this is a good opportunity for us to learn about your journey in this game and in governance and in your career. So without any further ado, welcome to the Catalyst webinar series, and thanks for being here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's great being here. It's great being in Southern Cal, so to speak, in one size, shape, or form or another. It's pouring down rain here in Lansing, Michigan.
So we know that you have worked in a couple different sections, actually, I think 3 different sections: Ohio, Michigan, and Florida as well. You're originally from Milwaukee, but just kind of as an icebreaker, can you share your story in golf? We know you played at Arizona State, but can you talk about your introduction to golf as a player, and then later on in your career, making a vocational choice to be in this service industry, and also how you got involved in governance?
Sure, I can do that. First, I'm going to make a corrective statement. I went to the University of Arizona, so that so I'll get into a story about that as well, because it ties into Southern Cal. So I started playing golf. I'm the only one in my family that played golf. My parents were tennis players. They got to an age of about 50 and decided that tennis was not a game they could continue to play, so they took up the game of golf. I was the youngest in my family by 10 years, and they thought the best way to learn the game is to go to the driving range and take little John with them. And that's how I got introduced to the game as a 5-year-old. Started playing when I was 5 and took golf lessons from a renowned PGA professional in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Steve Bull, who was a great player. And he was my instructor all the way through college. I swam, I played golf. I got recruited by a couple schools to swim and play golf. I actually got recruited by the University of Arizona to swim, and I got down there and decided that I wanted to try to play golf. And so I walked on the golf team. I was one of Rick LaRose's first classes on the golf team. Played with John Ashworth at the University of Arizona, and also recruited a young man by the name of Rick Riley. And this is where the Southern Cal story kind of gets tied in. Rick was in high school. I think I was a sophomore or junior at the University of Arizona, and Rick came over for a recruiting trip with Jay Delsing and recruited Rick to come and play at the University of Arizona. So Rick shows up at the University of Arizona, and I get to know Riles pretty well. And then I graduate, leave, Riles stays and plays at the U of A. And time progresses, and as you said, I was on the Board of Control, and I had my outgoing Board of Control dinner at Toscana, and Paul Levy had invited all the dignitaries from that area to my dinner, which included Pat and Sue Riley. And I'm sitting down having dinner, and Sue Riley is sitting next to me, and she says, "So you're John Lindert?" And I said, "Yes." She said, "You're the John Lindert that gave your driver's license to my son, Rick, so he could get into a bar underage." And I went, "Ooh." I said, "Riles is your son?" And so that's a story that we've shared forever from that standpoint on. And Riles and I continue to stay in touch, and Sue's like a second mom to me from that standpoint. So That's my little introduction with Southern Cal. I graduated from college with my degree in accounting and really had a passion for teaching and a little bit of playing. I wanted to teach and I wanted to play a little bit. And I started off in Florida at a resort called the Meadows, which was an 18-hole resort. It was owned by a developer from the UK called Taylor Woodrow Homes. Spent about 2 years there and really wanted to get back to the Midwest. So I got an opportunity at a Donald Ross golf course in Canton, Ohio, where I worked for 3 years and worked under a really great PGA professional, Jim Logue, who was a great player, played on some cup teams for the PGA of America, played in several US Opens, played in several PGA championships. And he instilled the importance of playing the game was really important and advocated for us to play. Had my opportunity, I played in 5 National Club Professional Championships, made the cut in the couple, almost qualified for the PGA Championship one time. And that's when the qualifications was the top 40, not the top 20 like it is now. But continued to play and teach the game, and got an opportunity to have my own golf shop and be a head professional at a small private club in Bryan, Ohio, which is known for absolutely nothing except for Dum Dum Suckers and the Etch-a-Sketch and Ohio art. It's a town of 6,000 people and about 5,000 combines. And so, but I own my own shop. I own the driving range. I own bag storage. I paid all the payroll. It was a great opportunity for me to learn the business as a young 28-year-old kid. And then we had an opportunity to come to Michigan. And that's really a little bit more where governance got involved. Someone tapped me on the shoulder and asked me to be part of a chapter of the chapter board, the Western chapter of the Michigan PGA, which I took part in, and then got into governance in the section level. And I had expressed interest to Jim Remy and Alan Ranowski about, and actually Brian Whitcomb, about being on the board of control. And then in 2009, Jim appointed me on the board of control, which was really kind of a turning point in my career. The board of control, if you're not familiar, handles a lot of the judiciary aspects of our association. It handles membership appeals, associate appeals, and it actually brings to light what our members struggle with and some of the challenges that they face each and every day. And once I got involved with that, I realized I couldn't stop. I wanted to try to continue to help improve the lives of our PGA members. And I learned a lot of that through the board of control experience. So when the time came for me to run for district director, I did so, served 2 years, and then ran for secretary. And obviously there's different aspects. When you're on the board of control, you deal directly with the member. And there's probably no more gratifying experience that I have in my life than to help a member who is in need. We don't have to go very far than to be in your district and talk about all the PGA professionals in Maui that are struggling right now. And the board of control will deal with their appeals and their needs. And, while it is what it is, the amount of money that the association can afford to give is probably minuscule for some of those individuals. I've talked to Ben Hongo, and he said 2 PGA professionals lost their homes, and, it's a tragedy. But when you're sitting on the board of control and you can provide some help, and, in whatever size, shape, or form it is, it's a really, really gratifying experience. And as I said, that kind of led me to the next level of wanting to continue to help our fellow PGA members in whatever way I possibly could. And lo and behold, I never really had a dream of becoming a national officer. I actually, as a young man growing up, would look at the names on the side of my membership card and wonder if I would ever get to meet them, wonder what they would be like to talk to, and really never had that as a goal. I had more of the playing aspect as a goal. I thought I was going to be a player, and that didn't work out. There are a lot of really good players out there, but I played in several events, and I played in one what is now a Corn Ferry Tour event. But those players are so good, and the travel is so rigorous, that I felt that this was another way to give back to the game and give back to the association. So lo and behold, here I am.
So speaking of Michigan, you are the third national president to come from the Michigan section in the 106 years of the PGA of America. Can you talk a little bit about, now, of course, it's gotten easier over the years with the advent of Zoom, but can you talk a little bit about the support that you receive from the Country Club of Lansing for your servitude on the national board? I know particularly, obviously, you're in a seasonal position up there, so you know the Masters is before the season really kicks off, and the Ryder Cup's going to be kind of after. But can you talk a little bit about the travel expectation and how that's been this season in your first year?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's one that, yeah, as you said, Zoom has really helped us out quite a bit. I mean, obviously, this would have been something that I probably would have flown to Southern Cal to do, earlier, if it was 5 years ago. When I decided to run, the first thing I did is I went to my board here at the Country Club of Lansing and I laid out a plan of travel. And I had talked to Jim Richardson about his travel, and he gave me his travel plans, and I kind of presented that as secretary, and I said it would ramp up from there. So this year I've been gone a lot. I guess the way I put it is, the only way I can reference it is the time at home. So I'm currently at home, and this is going to be my largest stretch. And one time at home, I'm going to be home for 8 days. So during the entire year, that's the longest period of time where I've been home. And it really starts with, as you said, it starts with the Masters. And all of April is pretty much between the Masters and the PGA Professional Championship. And then we roll into May, which brings us to PGA Works Collegiate Championship. And we work into the PGA Championship, the Senior PGA Championship. So we have a cluster of about that 6-week period where we have 4 events, and we're gone predominantly that entire time. Then you roll into June and we get into the KPMG Women's PGA Championship. July, we go to the Open Championship and we have some meetings there. I'm leaving Sunday to go to committee meetings in Chicago. And then I will go down to Frisco, to the home of the PGA of America, for the captain's picks, the 29th of August, where Captain Zach Johnson will name his 6 picks for the Ryder Cup. Then it kind of slows down a little bit until we get to the Ryder Cup. But then you get into October and we have PGA Junior League Championships. We have Senior PGA Professional Championships. There's a variety of different, and we have fall meetings for a lot of sections. So at the end of the day, we'll probably be on the road somewhere in the neighborhood of 200 days. And the club here has been very generous with that. They've allowed me to rewrite my contract. They've allowed me to they still want me to utilize personal time off and have PTO, but they still want me to travel on behalf of the association. And so they have blessed me that whatever travel I need to do for the association, they give me the grace to go ahead and make that decision and go, and encourage me to do so. So it's an unusual situation. Don's in a different situation. He's an owner, and Nathan works for an ownership group. So we're all kind of different. I'm at strictly a private facility.
So speaking of heading down to Frisco for the captain's picks, how much communication have you had with Zach Johnson over the last several months in terms of preparations for the Ryder Cup?
So, I was with Zach in Manchester Airport after the Open Championship, and we talked briefly about, the team and who's playing well and what decisions he might have to make. And then at the end of July, just shortly the next week, actually, I went to his gala fundraiser in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, where Zach does a great job at the club where he grew up. And we've kind of talked a little bit, but he's such a great individual, and he's such a calming influence that he's taking this approach that he's going to build the best team that he can build. He's going to utilize, I think he's going to utilize the same template that was used in the past, where the top 6, the automatic qualifiers, their voices will be taken into account as to who they want as their teammates, who do they pair well with as partners and in the event. And he'll talk to those 6 players and get their input about his 6 captain's picks. It may be a straight 7 through 12. And it may include somebody that is outside that top 12. Haven't really talked to him about that. I mean, obviously the big discussion right now is Lucas Glover and Justin Thomas. Those are the 2 big names that people are talking about. Ricky is sitting outside the top 12 at this point. Brooks Koepka is inside the 6, but he's sitting at 5 with 1 event left, with 2 guys very close behind him. So he may get bumped out of that top six. And then what Captain Johnson does with that, I really can't say. But, I did a radio show the other day, and I said, I'm envious of him, but I also, don't envy him because he's got such great names to choose from. When you look at the list that sits from 7 to 15, the names of the players that are there are some really, really great players. And obviously Lucas Glover's got a very hot hand, but it'll be 7 weeks from his victory this last week until the Ryder Cup. And that's quite a while for someone to cool off. And I know we talk about Justin Thomas, and someone said, well, he didn't make the playoffs. I said, yeah, that's the first year that he didn't make the playoffs. And if the playoffs were set up like any other year, he would have, because it was always the top 120. This year it was the top 70, and he was sitting at 71. I said he would have made it by 40 spots. So, he and Jordan Spieth have a great chemistry together. They're great teammates together. I don't know whether he is of consideration or not, but those are the names that keep popping in, are Ricky Fowler, Justin Thomas, and now Lucas Glover. It's going to be really interesting to see.
No, I wouldn't imagine that you have the same kind of communication with Luke Donald, but what has the communication been with the team on the other side of the pond?
I haven't had a conversation with Luke as much, but I have sat down with Guy Kinnings when I was at the Open Championship. He and I had a couple dinners together. Guy is the CEO of Ryder Cup Europe, and he kind of keeps me abreast as to what's going on over there. I get the notices of when they named their captains, their vice captains. He's a great guy. He's a great individual. Luke, I got to meet when we were in Rome in the 1 year to go event. And what's really interesting, and this is nothing against anybody else that was already selected as a captain, but when you have Luke Donald and Zach Johnson sitting at a press conference table, you have two people that absolutely exemplify what the game of golf is all about. Their integrity, their sportsmanship, how they treat each other, and how they talk about the game, and how they talk about their approach to this Ryder Cup is truly impressive. Obviously, Luke is a Northwestern grad. He married a girl from Chicago. They live here in the States. But there's just that sense that there's no antagonistic approach to each other. They're just there trying to be great captains in a great sporting event, and that for a great game. And I think that they hold the event in such high regard that it's not so much about them, but it is about the Ryder Cup, and it is about the competition.
So you mentioned the 1 year to go event in Italy. I think you've only been over there that one time since in preparations for this. Can you talk a little bit about some of the challenges with having it in Italy, and some of the things you're looking forward to, and some of the things you're watching out for?
Yeah, it's interesting. I make the Captain Obvious statement, but Rome was not a city built for cars. And I know that may seem one of the most obvious statements, but it's a very difficult city to navigate around when it comes to automobiles. So trying to get it, we just had our first briefing yesterday, trying to get from the hotels to the golf course, which is outside the city, is going to be one of the interesting challenges. When we are Whistling Straits, there was an escort that got people to and from the hotel to the golf courses, because there was just one road in and out. I think there's going to be some travel challenges from the hotels to the golf course, timing wise. That's what I look at. But the golf course itself, Jim Richardson, Don Ray, and I got a chance to play it. The golf course itself is fairly hilly. I think it's going to be a really good match play golf course. As opposed to being in Paris, where Ryder Cup Europe had a chance to play that golf course numerous times. This golf course is a redesign, and they've only played the Italian Open there twice. So the players really are not as familiar with it on that side of the pond. We're actually sending our team over for a practice round in early September to get acclimated to it. Extremely hilly golf course, but it's going to be interesting to see how Ryder Cup Europe sets up the golf course. The 16th hole is a drivable par 4. The 17th hole is a good par 3, and the 18th hole is a reachable par 5. So theoretically, you could have a lot of excitement coming down the stretch on 16, 17, and 18. And I think, what the standard MO for Europe at this point is they tend to shrink the fairways in because they tend to be straighter hitters, a little bit shorter but straighter, and they try to take advantage of that accuracy over the length. And so I would look for the fairways to be a little tight, a little narrow. I would look for the rough to be fairly high. They did that in Paris, and they also set the gallery ropes quite a ways away from the fairway, so that if you miss the fairway by 5 yards or 10 yards, that you'd still be in some heavy rough, and then you wouldn't be in a trampled down area by the gallery. So I look for Ryder Cup Europe to set the golf course up in kind of in favor of their players. But it's going to be a really great venue for this event.
So kind of changing gears here, when you took office in November, at that time, it wasn't really clear what was going to happen with exemptions and qualifying eligibility for Live Tour players in terms of our majors. Obviously, we've gone through all of that now 8 months later. Can you talk a little bit about your role on the PGA Tour Policy Board and how that's gone since you've taken office?
Yeah. So as the president, you get to sit on the PGA Tour Policy Board. And with everything that was going on at that time, they wanted to make sure that they kept me somewhat at arm's length and didn't get drawn into the lawsuit. So my time on the policy board is they invite me in for a period of time where if I can provide input, I will. Their meetings have been fairly lengthy, but my time in the room has not been as much. I've been had 3 actual meetings. I've been in the room, half an hour for one, 2 hours for another, and an hour for a third. But the meetings extend well outside of that. So really, my role from that perspective hasn't been immense. It hasn't been very big. From the PGA America standpoint, what we have is, a lot of people may understand or may not, but we have that grace period that when you no longer are quote unquote eligibly employed, if you paid your dues, your dues are paid for that year. So let's say somebody in Southern Cal loses their position tomorrow. They've paid their dues that go all the way through June 30 of 2024. They get that period of time as a grace period plus 1 additional year. So they'll actually get till June of 2025 to have eligible employment. So when it came to the live players that were on the PGA Tour and are no longer, that's how they've been treated. They paid their dues, they paid their PGA America dues, they're covered for the 2022 to 2023 season, and they get a 1-year grace period that wraps all the way through 2024. So that's how some would be eligible from that standpoint.
So, it's not uncommon for a big rift to happen between professional sports and amateur sports. We have all this quote unquote turmoil at the professional level. However, the amateur level in the game, as it relates to the 28,000 PGA members out there growing the sport and experiencing the biggest boom since the late 90s in the Tiger Woods era, we're in a very good place as an industry. What do you think we can do as PGA members to keep that momentum going?
Well, I think we're doing it. I think PGA Junior Leagues, we haven't, in my opinion, we have not seen the end of this, because PGA Junior League is doing such a fantastic job of not only introducing the game to young people, but it's developing golfers for the future. We had a young woman last year play, I believe, from California, who actually made the round of 32 in the women's amateur. And she was a 13-year-old girl that played for California, I believe it was California. That's a remarkable story. She's playing on a PGA Junior League team, playing in the scramble, and then 2 weeks later, she's in the round of 32 in the U.S. Women's Amateur Championship. I think that in and of itself, that PGA Hope is developing. It's utilizing the game to save lives with our veterans, but it's also developing golfers. And I think we are doing it. I think we are also finding more and more positions that are becoming available at, say, Topgolfs, So now when people come out for that social atmosphere and they're not really introduced into the green grass aspect of it, there's a PGA professional that's there on site that can help them. So I think that what we are doing currently it's going to reap benefits going forward. I think as PGA Junior League continues to grow and blossom, we're going to continue to have that next generation of golfers continue to play the game, and that's where our successes will lie, is creating that.
So you touched on PGA Junior League, PGA Hope, PGA Family, capitalizing on the growth of the sport from an amateur level. We, as PGA members, want to make the game as accessible as possible. Can you talk a little bit about your philosophies on what's going on with the golf ball itself and discussions about making it not go as far, and how that may be a detriment to all these new people that are playing the game?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, as I alluded to, we had some meetings over at Hoy Lake, over at the Open Championship, and Don Ray, Nathan Karn, Seth Waugh, and myself met with what we call the PGA World Alliance. So those are the CEOs and chairmen or presidents of PGA Canada, PGA Great Britain and Ireland, PGA Sweden, PGA Germany, PGA South Africa, PGA New Zealand, and PGA Australia. And we had a conversation about the golf ball. We all came to the agreement that bifurcation is not great for the sport. We think that that's one of the great nuances of our game, that you can go and you can purchase a dozen golf balls and a set of golf clubs that is the same that you're seeing the Rory McIlroy or Tiger Woods play every day. And it puts into perspective that when they hit their drive 350 yards and the average person is hitting at 250, the athletic ability of these individuals. The development of an elite ball will change a lot. And we talked about it. It's not just the ball that it changes, because in talking to manufacturers, the ball is the engine of which they build everything else. So if you roll back the golf ball, manufacturers are going to design a different driver. They're going to design a different 3-wood, a different hybrid, a different set of wedges, a different set of irons that are built for that specific golf ball. They're built for those spin rates and those launch conditions. So what you would then find is that the elite player would play a totally different set of product than the amateur does, or that the non-elite, the recreational, we'll say recreational player does. Obviously, some of the concerns is people are hitting the ball so far that some of our traditional historic golf courses are becoming a little obsolete. The bunkering is misplaced. Golf courses are spending money, millions of dollars to relocate bunkers to make them more penal for today's driving distance. But at the same point, I think that whole idea of bifurcation is really something that we were sternly against. The game is booming, and as anybody knows, it's not that easy. These individuals at a very elite level are working harder every day to become better athletes. And I've got to see it firsthand. I had no idea what these players went through. But when you go to a PGA championship or you go to an Open championship and you see the routine that these players have, where they're in the gym 2 to 3 hours before their tee time, and then they're in with their physio an hour into 2 hours before their tee time, and then they go to the range and they hit some balls, and then they come back and see their physio, and then they go play and they get done playing and they go back to see their physio again, and some of them go back to the gym and work out again. It's incredible. It's not like the 60s. I know that. The way they maintain and take care of their bodies is remarkable. And I think you're seeing some of the fruits of that labor. Is they're powerful players. So I think at the end of the day, talking to manufacturers, they feel like the golf ball has seen a limit. I think if we draw a line in the sand right now, I think we're probably pretty good. Once again, bifurcation is not something that we really support. I also look at it from an operator standpoint. I have 2 young men. One is going to play for Michigan State next year. One is currently playing for the University of Kansas that I work with. And if the elite ball gets developed, that means I'm going to have an elite range ball. And that means that they're going to have an elite set of golf clubs. And I'm going to have to figure out how I separate the elite range ball from my recreational range ball There's just some challenges to it that I don't believe everybody has worked out, and I don't know that the USGA and RNA have thought about all the other ramifications with creating two balls. But I know that they're looking out after the best interest of the game. The comment period has ended. It ended, I believe, August 14th, so just a few days ago. So I'm hoping that we'll get some word from the USGA and RNA as to what they got from that comment period. I just think the numbers that they're using to create that elite ball are a little bit amped up compared to where they are right now. Right now we're at, I don't know what the launch angle and spin rate are right now, but the club head speed was 120. They were going to go to 127 mile an hour club head speed with 11 degrees launch and 2,200 RPMs in backspin, which really nobody, well, one or two people on tour may have that at this point in time. And the reality is that in talking to some of the manufacturers and getting some of the data points, the top 10 in driving distance are not the leading money winners. And as a matter of fact, the top 10 average is outside the FedEx Cup players pool of 70 players. So, you know, distance doesn't always equate to low scores. That cup and that putter are still pretty important.
Well, I've heard you speak on that before, because it's not just, you know, creating a ball for the tour players. It's actually what they're guarding against is 1% of those tour players. It's just the long hitters amongst them.
Yeah, and collegiate players. And I did an interview with Michael Breed way early in this process, and I said, you know, if this process were to go through and the PGA Tour were not to adapt it, we could have the only sport in history where the amateur game is harder than the professional game. And I think that, you know, you saw Jay Monahan come out and say they're not in favor of the rollback golf ball. You may have seen the letter that the PGA World Alliance sent out, signed by all of the CEOs, that we're not in favor of bifurcation. We think time is our friend. We think giving time to create data, one set of data, is beneficial for the game. And we hope that with that time, we can make a better decision. Is 127 the right club head speed? Is 121 the right club head speed? Is 120 the right club head speed? Data will help us create that. And then we can eliminate the idea of any bifurcation whatsoever, because bifurcation, you know, here again, think of all the other sports. You know, you go to baseball and at a college level, they play with an aluminum bat, and you go to a wood bat in the professional game. Even football, the hash marks, the size of the football, the goalposts, everything's different. And it's very unique to our sport, where anybody can go and play the same equipment that they can watch a tour player play on Sunday.
So on the amateur side of things, what do you think is the next big trend in the golf industry?
Boy, I think what you're seeing, the most impactful is basically it's a lot of the off-course stuff, right? And you're seeing some of the virtual aspect. You're going to see some of that. Tiger Woods and Rory McIlroy have this thing coming out that's going to be kind of like made for TV. It's more of a simulator golf aspect. I think that will be an interesting thing to watch, to see how that progresses. Obviously, technology has gotten so good lately that you can have these simulators that are so accurate and so real, and the projection screens are so vivid that you could start to see some competitions virtual, which is, for me, I'm not a tech guy, so it makes my head spin. But I think you could definitely see where virtually you could have a league where I could have a team from Michigan. We talk about this aspect of me doing a Zoom call with all in Southern California. 15 years ago, we would have said that is impossible. But I can see it where I can have my team from the Country Club of Lansing play a team from Southern Cal virtually in a match. And I think that is probably coming.
Impressive. So what are your thoughts on the PGA show, and how are we going to continue to grow it?
So, you know, it's really interesting. I've been going to the PGA show for a long time, and I've seen the very high end of it. I've seen people come to the show and vendors come to the show just because they want to be on the coattails of a lot of people walking through the hallways. I can remember one time going to the PGA show, and a guy that had a ladder company took out a booth at the PGA show. He was selling ladders, and just all he wanted to do is get his ladder in front of as many consumers as possible, which I thought was kind of funny. And then obviously COVID hit, and we had a little bit of a step back. But the show that we had 2 years ago, well, it was criticized for low attendance. What we had is we had buyers. We had people there that were there to do business. We had people there to write orders. And when I talked to the vendors, they were really, really impressed. They wrote more orders than they wrote the year before that. They didn't have people coming in and kicking the tires, wasting their sales reps' times, asking a bunch of questions, and then not writing a single order. And I think that when that message got out last year, we saw an increase in vendors again, that the show is kind of been reimagined. It's now kind of back to what it was meant to be. And that's a show to write orders. And that's a show to get to see companies that don't have national sales force. And not necessarily do we have the tire kickers anymore. So I think as we continue to utilize it, I've always been a guy that I thought the 4-day show was better than the 3-day show, because the last day is always the last day. And I just think that, I remember in my time, I spent 7 hours in Tommy Bahama's booth, because you had to do men's, and you had to do women's, and you had to do resort, you had to do shoes, and you were there almost all day. Sales reps today, they give you about an hour. I think that adding another day could potentially allow for more than an hour, because I'm one of those guys. I need more than an hour to make that decision. But I think as long as we continue on the path that we're on, where we don't have as many tire kickers and we have order writers, the show will continue to succeed.
So as we wrap up our hour together here, I've heard you tell this story before, but I know that the 59 PGA members from the SoCal section probably haven't. But can you talk a little bit about in your office at Country Club of Lansing, you have a signed picture of you and Arnold Palmer. And in that picture, there's a glove. Can you talk about your Arnold Palmer story and tell us that glove story as well?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for asking that. So as I said, as a young kid, I started off in Florida, and then I went to work in Ohio. And when I went to work in Ohio, I wintered at PGA National. So by wintering, I mean I worked the bag room. So I was the guy that got there at 4 o'clock in the morning. We brought up 300 golf carts by 6. I was the guy standing there putting clubs out of trunks of cars and staying there until my routine was I got to work till noon, and then from noon to 2 hit balls, and from 2 to dark I would play golf at PGA National. So one year Arnold Palmer was coming out to do the grand opening of, at that point, the Palmer golf course, which he needed a caddy, and by caddy I use that term very loosely. So we drew straws. I picked the long straw. I got the caddy for Mr. Palmer, and really what happened is we put his golf bag on a cart. Ed Say, who was the designer of the Palmer course, drove the golf cart, and Mr. Palmer and I walked side by side while he played this exhibition of the grand opening. It was a terribly windy day. And so rather than play all 18 holes, he played 9. He played a little route that went out on the front 9 and came back, and we were playing 18, which is a great par 5. And Mr. Palmer at that point had the Newman black leather grip, steel shaft, a really thick persimmon black-headed driver. And he hits driver and going dead into the wind on 18. And he hits driver off the deck again. And the ball goes slightly into just into the rough, but it's not grown in just yet. So Mr. Palmer looks at me and says, "John, kick it." And I said, "What?" He said, "Kick it." So I kicked the ball about a foot. And he looks at me and he goes, if I'm going to ask you to kick my golf ball, I want you to kick my golf ball. Kick it out here in the fairway where I can hit it. So I kick it out in the fairway, and now he hits 2-iron. He hits this beautiful drawing 2-iron, overcooks it a little bit, goes into the water left. And he goes, "John, throw me another ball." So I throw him another ball. Hits 2-iron again, same shot right in the pond. He goes, that's it. I say, hey, I got one more ball in this sleeve. We can hit it again. Throw another ball, knocks it on the green. We get done, and he said, are you on duty right now? I said, no. And he goes, well, why don't you come into the members lounge and have a couple beers with me? So I go in the members lounge and I have a couple beers with him, and the man was just so gracious. I saw him actually at the PGA show 4 years later, and I had just had I had a daughter and I had a son, and he recognized me. And my son hates this story to this day because he's an avid golfer. And Mr. Palmer grabs my daughter Brooke and holds Brooke, and my son's sitting in the stroller, and JD is forever mad at Brooke that she got held by Arnold Palmer, and he did not. But Mr. Palmer, obviously I got the autographed glove, and I've got the wonderful story. I've got a photo album of us walking the fairways together, and what a gracious individual.
But that's not how you got the glove.
No, the glove is a different story. So my mom knew that I was obviously a big Palmer fan, and my mom was doing needlepoint, and we had a Channel 10 auction, which is our public TV station in Milwaukee, and they do fundraisers, as you see, every year. And so she's needlepointing away, and she hears, auction for Arnold Palmer golf club is what she thought she heard. So she calls up Channel 10 auction immediately and bids $50. And all the bids just die off. No one's buying a golf glove for $50, but my mom heard golf club. So she goes down to Channel 10 auction, and she goes to pay the $50 and get the golf club, and they bring out this glove. And she goes, so that's not what I bought. I bought a club. And they said, Mrs. Lindert, we didn't auction off a club. We auctioned off a glove. And she goes, well, I don't want to pay $50 for a glove. And they said, well, why don't you pay like $5 more than the next highest bid? And she said, okay. And she had called so fast that the next highest bid was like $10. So she got the glove for $15. And I have it framed in my office next to the photo of Mr. Palmer, myself. And it's a great story. It's a great reminder of my mom and what she was doing all the time. And she was avid. She drove me to the driving range all the time. So, I love her to death. She passed away in 99, but I love her to death for having me get involved in the game of golf. And that serves as a constant memory.
Great. That's wonderful. Well, President Lindert, on behalf of the Education Committee for the SoCal PGA, thank you very much for giving us an hour of your time this morning. For all the section members that are on this morning's webcast, you will receive 1 PDR credit for watching the Catalyst this morning. Thank you for supporting it. It's been wonderful. President Lindert, thank you for your time, sir. Have a great day, everybody. Take care.
Thanks.